Got it. And now we're going to go back a few hundred years and read what Maimonides has to say in his Guide for the Perplexed about the existence of evil. I gave you the introduction last time, so we will simply begin with what he says. And in a very famous passage indeed, taken from the third book, chapter 12, he begins, and I'll translate this, line 5 actually, section 1. Rov haraot hem me'ishei bnei adam hachaserim. Most of the evil in this world is a result of defects in people. It's defective people. We know about them. ומהרעות שנעשה אותם בעצמנו בבחירתנו. And we cause ourselves a lot of evil. נכאב ונייחסהו להשם. We suffer and then we say, it's God's fault. חלילה לא ממנו. Heaven forfend that God actually does evil. כמו שביאר בספרו, as God explained in his own book, the Torah, ואמר, Shichet lo, has God destroyed? Is he malevolent? Lo, no. Banav mumam, the blemish is in his children. It's in people. Ubi'er Shlomo va'amar mishlei ivelet adam tesalef darko.
Prof. Sinclair, where are you reading from?
Sorry. I'll do a share screen. I forgot. Okay. Do you see, Yael? Okay.
Yes, thanks.
Excellent. Although you did get the sources, you could have printed them off. But never mind. We are going to show everybody what we are reading from. Okay. Book 3, chapter 12. Line 7. Shlomo va'amar, ivelet adam tesalef darko. People's stupidity does indeed pervert their ways. Yal Hashem is afribo. And then, can we please have a general mute, Yael? Thank you. Great. And then his heart frets against the Lord. But now Rambam, in his systematic way, his great Aristotelian systemism, divides evils up into 3 classes. Class 1, hamin ha'echad, min hara hu ma shikre la'adam mitzad hateva, ha'havaya v'ha'efsed, ratzon lomar me'asher hu ba'al chomer. As we've learned, nature, everything in the world is composed of matter and form. Matter degrades. Everything physical becomes corrupt and eventually passes and becomes something else. So we can't blame God for that because that's how the world is created. And apparently it is a good thing. We'll talk about why it's a good thing shortly. But this is why, for example, certain people are born with defective limbs, or they get a condition that makes them defective. This could be caused by all sorts of physical environments, too much cold, too much heat. And Be'arnu, beginning of line 11, Sha'chochma Elohit chiva shelo tiyeh havai ki im behefsed. God wants the world to consist of matter and form. Matter is often bad, but matter basically is physical, so it degrades, it becomes corrupt, it goes bad, and the form is the good part. And these things, as we learned, are always in a certain tension. Why did he do that? Elsewhere, as Maimonides explains, that the world is created in this way in order to give an opportunity for people to exercise their free will. If everything was perfect, if we were all possessed of bionic bodies, we never became ill, there were no earthquakes, there were no tsunamis, there were no people who were born with terrible genetic diseases, we wouldn't be challenged to overcome the Chomer and become creatures of Yetzer. And the marvelous thing, I suppose, about human beings in this context, their physical difficulties, is that they can be overcome in an amazing way. Just to give one example, we have had people who have overcome most terrible diseases such as amyotrophic lateral sclerosis, ALS, Stephen Hawking being one case, to go on to become amazing thinkers and pioneers in their fields. Looked at it from this perspective, it means that whilst there are deficiencies and, if you like, even minor tragedies or major tragedies built into the way we are, this gives us an opportunity to become the people we are. And the people we are can be very great. Of course, by the same token, very great people, we can also have terribly evil people. So it's free will. Or habrakim atzumim or shkiat mukomot, different climatic catastrophes. Far bi'arnu, okay. Then Maimonides says, if you think about it, most people are born with all their faculties. Most people do not suffer these terrible deformities in their lives. And most times, nature is tame enough to allow us to exist. Countries have enjoyed many years of no natural disasters at all. And so many babies are born perfectly healthy, not blemished and not defective in any way. And if you think about the number, you will realize that actually, basically, it is good. And the evils are the exceptions, not the rule. And we often forget that. And we'll understand that when Maimonides comes to a third explanation for the understanding of evil. So we have to put evil into proportion. This type of evil, which is a deficiency arising out of the fact that the world is created out of a combination of matter and form. Line 15, the bold part. The next type of evil is what people do to each other. And people do to each other terrible things. This is because people have free will. They're composed of the matter, which gives them an evil inclination, the form, which gives them a good inclination. The two are in tension, and the evil side, the matter, dominates. And as a consequence, people do evil to each other on an individual level. They also do evil to each other on a collective level. In other words, they fight. Now, he says 16 v'sibotam rabot v'yiduot. There are many reasons for people and for nations and for empires fighting each other and causing havoc, tragedy. 50 million soldiers died in the First World War. For what? Well, the Midrash talks about Cain and Abel, Cain and Hevel. Says that the three things that people have been fighting about since the beginning of time are territory. They've been fighting about religion. They've been fighting about reproduction. And if you think about it, animals are not different except possibly with regard to religion, which again can be very good or very bad. But beasts and fish and even plants fight about reproduction and territory. Got to get the good territory, got to pass on the genes. And humans are no different. So we fight. Our fights are more sophisticated. They happen to engage philosophies. They happen to engage ideologies. And we do terrible things to each other because of that. But this, says Rambam, is again, it's people. Now line 20, Vamina Shlishi. What's the third class of evils? That's the evils we do to ourselves. Now here Rambam comes out as a doctor and as an ascetic. We read about his attitude. Thank you, Bernard. The trouble is that we're too indulgent, okay? And both Greek medicine that Maimonides was an expert in wants harmony. It believes that disease isn't something that happens because something happens. Of course, you can break a limb, but generally you feel bad because you're not in harmony with all the different aspects of your bodily life. So you're overindulging. Too much eat food, too much drink, too much sex, too much exposure to bad air, and you're not going to be well. In other words, it's your fault. Okay? Now then he gets on his favorite hobby horse, and look at this. He says, at the end of line 24, Atzalomar, now line 25, Rov hata'ava b'machal u'v'mishteh u'v'mishgal. Most of the time we sin against our bodies by overdoing the material part. We eat too much, we drink too much, and we have too much sex. U'lekichatam b'yitron kamut o b'hefsed seder, and we do it because of quantity folly, or we don't do it in the right order, or our food is not the right quality, and that's why you get many diseases, both physical and mental. He says, what are mental diseases? Mental diseases are stress. You bring yourself into a stressful situation. Why do you bring yourself into a stressful situation, says Maimonides? Because you're chasing wealth. You want luxuries. You want a better car, bigger place, a nicer yacht. He talks about wine, and he talks about pilagshim rabot, line 33, many concubines, and he lives in a Muslim society. This is what happened. Remember the Islamic hereafter and all that, okay? And these concubines need expensive jewelry, bimine tachshitei zahav, v'rikma, and fine clothes, v'avanim tovot, and precious stones. Ad shi'ur ruchot lemishgal b'yoter ma'asher. So, you overindulge, because if you do have a harem of 50 women, then you're going to be somewhat pushed in terms of the sexual drive. And also because you're going to overdo things, and you're going to have to go on campaigns to gain money to pay for this very luxurious lifestyle. This is what you should not be doing. So you injure yourself, and also you make yourself stressed out, because when you cannot achieve the same lifestyle physically and corporeally as your neighbors or as your fellow sheikhs or sultans or khalifas, then you're going to get frustrated, and then it won't be good for your heart, and then you're going to have a heart attack, and then you'll be all gone. So the thing is to be a Maimonidean seeking perfection. For that, you don't need much at all. Remember, seeking knowledge, contemplating, living in a modest 6x6 room, and just thinking doesn't require too many resources, and you'll be very calm, okay? Now, he says on page 2, כי כל העניין יותר צריך לבעל החיים, הוא נמצא יותר ויותר בחינם. Maimonides says that if you're pursuing the path to perfection, most of what you need is going to be free, okay? וכל מי שימעט צורך הכרחי, הוא נמצא יותר מעט והוא יקר מאוד. When you want things that are above bare necessities, then you have to put out a lot, you have to undergo stress, and then you'll become ill, or you'll become psychologically distracted. All of this is not good for you, and that's why evils happen, and then you say, God did it. Maimonides says you got the wrong end of the stick. It wasn't God, it was you. כי העניין ההכרחי לאדם על דרך משל, הוא האוויר והמים והמזון. All you need is a bit of air, a bit of water, and some basic food. אומנם צורך האוויר יותר חזק שאם יתקדם קצת שעה ימות, אבל המים יעמוד בלעדיו יום או יומיים. Then he gets picky and he says, look, air you need all the time, but how often do you need water? Every couple of days. And air is cheaper than water, and water is cheaper than food. So when you confine yourself to eating rarely and very basic foodstuffs, you're fine, you're okay. You don't get stressed, you won't get sick, and you'll just be sailing along comfortably in a Maimonidean haze, perfecting your intellect and getting to know and to love God. Now, I just, for curiosity's sake, Omnam, line 7 in the middle. What is that word? after omnam. Line 7, there are two words with quotation with Gershayim's in. What are they?
Musk.
Very good, musk. And what do we use musk for? It's a famous perfume in the Muhammad, in fact, and his followers. That was their favorite perfume when they were about to engage in manly activities. They put musk all over themselves. Okay, it comes from the musk deer. Okay, and it's famous perfume. And Jeff, do you know what the next one is? Because it's also a perfume.
Anbar.
Inbar. What does the word Inbar mean? It's a girl's name. Amber.
Amber,
Inbar
yes.
is amber, and that is also a great perfume. Odem and Bareket are what? Jewels in the Kohen Gadol's breastplate. What is Odem? A red jewel. Ruby. And what is Bareket?
An emerald or a beryl.
A beryl. Okay. So these are the things that you shouldn't be yearning for. And these were the things that in the Islamic world that Maimonides lived in were prized as luxuries. Medieval Europe was the same. Certainly early modern Europe, when spices began to come in from the east, the spice kings of Europe were the wealthiest men, including, of course, the Mendes brothers. And we know the wife of Francisco, who is known to us as Hannah Mendes or Donna Grazia, the famous Marano heroine. So this is what the Rambam says you shouldn't be going after. Eini choshev she'echad mishleimei hadat yachshov sheyesh behem tzorech gadol adam ela lirefuah. Now you might use them as they were used for a cure, but you don't need them other than that. Don't go looking up for luxuries. They will be your undoing. He also talked about the fact that you will undertake dangerous sea voyages, and then what happens? You might drown, as the Rambam's brother died, drowned in the Indian Ocean looking for pearls. Not that he was diving for the pearls, but he was going to India to engage in trade to bring back precious stones, pearls. So, but actually, you don't need musk and amber expensive cures. You can get them from many different types of plants and from many different types of earth. And, you know, you look at medieval pharmacology, they had a tremendous range of natural pharmaceutical products. And many of them are clearly beneficial today. זהו פרסום גמילות חסדי השם יתברך למציאותו, אפילו בחוק זה החי החלוש. God makes everything available, even to us weak creatures, if only we have the right perspective. So I suppose that what Maimonides is saying in this first comment on the existence of evil is that we have the resources that we need to pursue a life of perfection. This is a very modest life. This is a life that only requires the bare necessities, and the rest is a life of the mind and of the soul. If you would only, I think Rene Descartes said something about the fact that the problem in life is that people cannot sit in a small room and contemplate. If they could, we'd all be fine. Okay, but then of course, Pascal was a philosopher. Maimonides is a philosopher. Not all of us are charmed by the idea of sitting in a small room most of the day with a minimal amount of water and food, of course enough air, and contemplating abstract ideas and getting close to God. So therefore, we're back at the point that this is a book written for people who might actually want to do that. So for them, it is a convincing argument. Anybody want to comment on the first plank in Maimonides, namely that there are evils which are part of what we might call nature. This is the way we are. This gives us free will. We can rise to great heights by coping with great difficulties. In the midst of the tsunami in Thailand, you can rescue someone and you can unselfishly help people get to high ground if you're a powerful swimmer. So And these events, these cataclysms, are very few. Most of the evil we have in the world that affects us is caused by other people, and that can be individuals, psychopaths, sociopaths. It can be nations who always fight over territory, reproduction, and religion. And this is part of what it is to be a human being in that world that consists of a combination of matter and form. Anybody want to comment on that now? No? Okay. So then we will move on. And we will... John, yes.
In the first sentence of Re natati lefanecha ha bracha v'haklala. Is that not another presentation of bad and good than the presentation of Rambam?
It's Rambam will tell you exactly what he said last week. Well, when we were learning this, he would say, "Re'ei anochi noten lechem hayom bracha uklala. Et habracha asher tishma'u, haklala im lo tishma'u." Exactly what we said. If you do well, and remember, if you become the best of the human species that you can, like Moshe, then God will give you special attention. But if you're a regular, common person, and you haven't got that far up the ladder, then what did Rambam say? You don't get any hashgacha. Hashgacha is only in proportion to your perfection, because God doesn't look at individuals. He's an Aristotelian God. He looks at the species as a whole and the best of the species. You may remember that I told you that when Greeks talked about a sports person, they didn't mean the average person who is a sports person. They meant the winner of the marathon. Everything in Aristotelian thought goes after the most perfect, the telos, the end. And so here, you got to get used to this idea. If you want to read Rambam and you want it to make some sense, it has to be in the context of his thinking and in his time. For him, this was not a shocking thought. So he would say the same thing exactly. All the promises, if they are promises in the Torah about this world, they refer to the person who is like Moshe Rabbeinu, okay, who we know had no suffering at all. Even when he was 120, he was fully active. Lo chahata eino v'lo nas lecho. Okay, so there we are. And we never hear that Moshe had a bad day, bad hair day. I mean, he may have had a problem with shining too much if from his forehead, but he was always there, always up. And as we read, when he left Sinai, God said, Po ata omed imadi, you stay with me. And Moshe's life was the perfect life. So he got the hashgacha. The second thing that Rambam says is that actually evil is an absence. It is not a presence. So you can't say, why did God create evil? Certainly didn't create evil. God created good. The absence of good is evil. And now, if God is responsible for an absence, that's hardly as bad as saying God is responsible for something positive. And is he responsible at all? In the world in which he created, we know that there is tension between matter and form. And so there are going to be places where, for example, elephants will flourish. This is a famous line from Rambam. Elephants flourish in Africa and in India, correct? Are there many elephants living in the wild in Spain?
For the moment, not.
For the moment, no. Great. Okay. Hannibal may have taken some. He took them via Spain, and he crossed, and he came He came to the north, and then he crossed the Rubicon, or wherever it is he crossed. But other than Hannibal and his elephants, we know of no elephants in Spain. Rambam says it's pathetic if you complain and say, God really did us a bad turn. We Spaniards, remember, always the Andalusian, never got any elephants. I would have liked some elephants around Cordoba. They would have been great. For what? I don't know. But can you really complain and say God is evil because he didn't provide elephants in Spain? No, elephants are in various countries. You may have had different animals in Spain. Polar bears are not available in London or Melbourne or New York or in Paris or in Zurich, but there we are. That's not a terrible tragedy. Let's read something else he says. First of all, he criticizes the mutakalimun. Now, the mutakalimun are the practitioners of kalam. Has anybody heard about this, and would they like to say something? Jean. Kalam.
I read, but I forgot. I'm not able to give some.
Okay, I will then see if I can step in. But the kalam are those, I'm going to be fairly, easy here. The kalam are the low-grade religious thinkers who believe that they are philosophers. The word kalam in Arabic means to talk. Okay? Yakul Sydney is may your excellence speak, which is how many of Rambam's Tuvot begin. Yakul, kalam, the speakers. Rambam, this is a school of thought that arose in Islam to try and make Islam seem sophisticated and intellectual. But Rambam says that the kalamists, the mutakalimun, are actually only trying to find the easy way out. They're not philosophically sound. They are a bunch of third-grade thinkers. And he includes in there some Jewish kalamists as well, including Sadi Gaon, okay? And he says the Karaites too. They are third-rate thinkers because they're not Aristotelians. They don't have great intellects, and basically they talk a lot of rubbish. Now, Rambam, as you said, John, didn't like the Gaon of Baghdad, and he lumps the Gaon of Baghdad together with the Kalamists. He says he's just trying to support religious principles with any philosophical ideas he can find, and they are very superficial and self-serving in their arguments. They begin with their conclusions, and then they try and find material to support those conclusions. Now, the Kalamists say that God does, and they believe that good and evil are both realities, like blindness and sight, death and life, okay? Cold and hot. Maimonides says they do not understand a thing, not natural science, not philosophy, garnished, nada, zilch, etc. כי אלו ההדרים אצלם עניינים נמצאים, וצריך שנודיעך דעתנו אנחנו בו, כפי מה שיגזרהו העניין הפילוסופי. Philosophers will tell you, and by the way, philosophers in Maimonides means those who know natural science, philosophy, mathematics, astronomy, ethics, and of course, metaphysics. All of this is rubbish because death is the absence of life. Evil is the absence of good, and blindness is the absence of sight. These are not independently existing entities. I'm not going to rehearse all of the medieval proofs for this, but it goes back to Aristotle. You may remember that Aristotle wrote the Acroasis. I told you what that was, and why Rambam says on line 17, Nizkar b'Sefer Hashema HaTivi. Now, what is Hashema HaTivi? That means the book of lectures on nature. Lishmoa, to hear a lecture on nature. And of course, acroasis is physike acroasis. Acroasis is hearing, physike is physics, the way nature works. So if in Aristotle's lectures on physics, he explains that what God does, and God, of course, is the unmoved mover, not really a God. He has created a mechanism called life. Life carries with it a risk of death, okay? He's created a mechanism called the eye that produces sight. Because it's a combination of matter and form, the eye has a potential for degrading and becoming ill and sick, and eventually, perhaps, leading to blindness. But God created the eye and sight. the absence of a sight
He didn't create blindness.
is a blindness, but that was not created by God. It was, as it were, indirectly part of the eye, as it is indirectly part of our bodies, of our natural world, okay? Corruption, degradation, illness, sickness, and death. But God did not create that. What he created was life and sight. And now let's have a look at something he gets very excited about. He gets very excited about a pasuk in Yeshayahu. Okay, and the pasuk we will find or at line 23. Okay. Where are we here? Perhaps it's a little further down. I want the pasuk in Isaiah Yotzer Or Uvorei Choshech Oseh Shalom Uvorei Ra. Must be around here somewhere. Okay. Here we are.
Yeah, here we are. It's
Here we
on,
are.
21,
21.
20 and 20.
Yes, line 20. Okay, Ulefi ze perush yitzba'er. Okay, now this is a pasuk we all know. I'm in the middle of line 20. Ulazeh ulefi ze perush yitzba'er b'mara Yeshayahu. Yotzer or uvorei choshech oseh shalom uvorei ra. This is what it says in Isaiah. God created light and made darkness, or formed light and created darkness, formed peace and created evil. How do we know that pasuk more commonly from our daily prayer?
So it's a code.
Oseh shalom uvorei et hakol. The Gemara in Brachot already explains that Lashon Malia, we didn't like the idea of uvorei ra, so it's a euphemism, hakol. But what does the pasuk actually mean? Rambam picks on the following aspect. He says, okay, Vistakel ech lo amar oseh choshech v'lo oseh ra. What did God actually make? Yotzer or, and then uborei choshech, oseh shalom, uborei. So what did God actually make? Asiya. He made light and he made peace. Okay? He made good. All right. Now, he says, Omnam al shnehem borei, shemila shesh la hatlut beheder balashon ha'ivri. The word beriah implies an absence, as it says, Bereshit bara Elohim, shehu me ha'heder. God created the world out of absence. There was nothing there, creatio ex nihilo. So the word bara means it came out of nothing. So what we're saying is that the actual creation of God was of light and good. The potential for absence of light and absence of good is part of God's creation, but he didn't actually create it because he's only indirectly responsible. Let's put it very simply. I can see Jeff, so I'm going to cite you. If I throw a rock at you, have I thrown a rock at you? Presumably the answer is
Yes.
yes.
Yes, you throw a rock
What
at me.
happens if a rock is falling and there is a net that you are standing underneath a net that would stop the rock hitting you and smashing your head? Lahav Rahman al-Islam. And I remove the net. Am I in the same category as if I had thrown the rock directly at your head? Logically, linguistically, even ethically. It's not the same. It's not the same.
So,
I would simply remove the net. You could still have avoided the rock. Okay. So
Your action.
this is what Rambam is getting at. He cites Aristotle for that, because Aristotle says, look, everything was put into place by God, this unmoved mover, the primal cause. Now, what can I attribute directly to God? If God would throw a rock at me, then he's clearly doing me evil. But say he created an eye that under certain circumstances is going to develop glaucoma, or we're going to have cataracts. Is that the same as taking a red hot fork and blinding somebody by sticking it into their eye? Ethics, philosophy,
No.
law, it's not the same. Okay.
Not the same,
Now,
no.
it's not nice, but it's not the same. So this is what Rambam is asking us to agree to, okay? That there is a difference here. And therefore, he says, let's read line 41. He says, "ומפני זה הוא סיבה לכל הפסד ולכל רע, ולזה כל מה שלא המציא לו השם, זה החומר לא יפסד ולא תשיגי רעה מן הרעות. תהיה כן אמיתת פעולת השם כולה טוב, אחר שהיא מציאות. וזה סיפר הספר אשר העיר מחשקי עולם ואמר, וירא אלוהים את כל אשר עשה והנה טוב מאוד." Everything that God did was good. Because in order to create a world that consists of matter and form, we have to have attention here, but God actually did much more good than he did bad, because the good was done directly. He gave us life, he gave us light, and the bad is indirect. Other things bring it about, but you think that if it happens to you, that the evil is all over and is a terrible thing. That's your blindness. עד שמציאות זה החומר השפל לפי מה שהוא מחייב למוות ולרעות כולם. כל זה גם כן טוב. It's actually not bad to have a bit of degeneration. And this is an important line. להתמדת ההוואי והמשך המציאות בבוא זה אחר סור זה. We have to leave the stage. Maimonides says, my friends, you don't want to live forever. This is not where we want to be. You accept the fact that you're given a limited time on this earth, that you use these wonderful things like the body, the eye, the ear, the heart, but it carries within it the seeds of aging and disease, and eventually it's going to shut down. But that is not, that doesn't mean bad God. It means this is life. And this is the wonder of life that gives us the capacity to do the things we can do to achieve perfection if we go about it the right way. Now, we'll have a comment in a second. And he cites the Midrash. Rabbi Meir says, Tov ma'od, Tov mavet. Actually, death is not bad either. Who would want to live 1,000 years, okay? What for? So, and Yom, I always cite, says Maimonides, the Nevi'im and the Chachamim. It's a Yeshayahu, it's Shlomo, in Mishlei, She'atov kulo mipulat Hashem be'etzem. In essence, and the word be'etzem is very important. In essence, God does only good. V'lashon Bereshit Rabbah, ein davar ra yored min. And here, Bereshit Rabbah, the rabbis say, nothing evil comes from above, only from below. It's the Chomer. It's we and the way we are created. And the way we are created gives us an opportunity to be the people we are. And in that sense, anybody heard of John Keats? John Keats. Anybody? Who was John Keats? I heard he was a poet.
Poet.
Anybody know a little more about him? Avilera, you were unmuted.
Well, okay.
Keats. What do you know about Keats?
I don't know much about him. Sorry. I know he's a poet. That's all.
It was an English poet, the same club as Lord Tennyson, and he wrote some famous odes. He was 25 when he died. 25 years old from consumption, from which he suffered many years. His brother and his other siblings also had consumption, and he actually studied studied medicine, but he left it to become a poet, and some of his poems are the most beautiful in the English language. It took a while for him to be recognized during his life. He was always in debt, but he had rich friends who helped him out, which is how you survived above water in 19th century England. If you went to a very good school, he went to Eton, I think, and he went to Oxford. So he was the right stuff, as one might say. Now, he penned a famous line, which is that, do you not see how necessary a world of pains and troubles is to school an intelligence and make it a soul? Very Maimonidean of him, okay? Not only does he accept the fact that we need corruption and regression and decay in order not to live too long, to make way for others, okay? And also to have a natural rhythm, but we need to make a soul. We create our souls. We come in with a potential to create a soul. Maimonides says a lot about this in the Shmoneh Prakim. We'll talk about that when we talk about reward and punishment. A place where the heart must feel and suffer in 1,000 diverse ways. This is our lot. And out of the suffering, we become a soul. And Keats used the phrase, the world is a vale, V-A-L-E, of soul making. A valley, a place which is low, but it's where we make our souls, a vale of soul making. So I have to go to Keats, like to so that you prick up your ears. But really, Maimonides said this a long time ago. Okay. Now, I hear Debbie saying none of that helps with evil. Why not? What is Rambam saying? Don't blame God for creating evil, for causing evil. Most evil, he says, is result of human action or lack of action, and especially lack of wisdom and understanding. What we perceive of evil is necessary for nature to exist and in order to be something that comes and goes. And the evils that we do to each other, evil people, are the majority of evils. So that when you discuss horrible, terrible things, we say, yes, but the evil wasn't done by God, it was done by people. They did the evil. Now you can say, God created human beings in such a way that they can be evil. Well, that is like me, as it were, creating or removing the net which kept the rock from falling on Jeff's head, okay? It's not the same as saying, yes, here I am giving evil into the world, blame me. No. And there were good reasons, says the Rambam, for having the world created that way. Otherwise, there would be a different world.
Yeah,
It wouldn't be a veil of soul making. Now, before we go any further, I would like to say that this is probably the weakest philosophical argument in the whole of the Guide for the Perplexed, because at the end of the day, those who are suffering feel very bad. And if you read this, you might feel this is very much a word game. But for Aristotelians, for medieval scholars, this is what they did most of the time. It's called philosophy, and they believed in this, so that when they spend years thinking about proofs for the existence of God, many of these proofs are, in a way, just making words mean different things, but they sincerely believed that they had proved the existence of God, and they felt that they had done so. So I think that this type of argument, it's more philosophical, it's more abstract, it appeals to a world in which the individual does not really count much. And this is the third thing that the Rambam actually says, okay? He says that the problem with us is that we expect to measure everything by ourselves, individuals. He says that's the wrong way of thinking. The fate of the world is not decided in accordance with individuals. The world is a collective of all sorts of natural phenomena. It's all sorts of human beings. And really, God is interested, as we learned in Hashgacha and following Aristotle, in the group as a whole, whatever group it may be. Rambam would say, in modern terms, we are far too obsessed with our individual existence. Let me give you an example again, which I'm drawing from the top of my head. What does the word autonomy mean? Or when I say autonomy, what do you think of?
I am
Psychology, okay? What's the next word that comes into your head? Autonomy.
indépendance,
Independence of thought.
Independence of thought. If I say, if I say patient autonomy, Jeff, what does that mean to you?
The right to decide how I want to be treated or not treated.
A right for a patient to decide. In other words, the wisdom of the doctor is all fine and wonderful, but actually we need to give the patient the right to decide. Is that always wise? And any other physician or a philosopher is welcome.
Depends what your aim is.
Is it always wise when you go to the doctor to insist on autonomy? Marcel, what do you think?
Oh, it's a mixed
Maggie.
blessing.
A mixed blessing. There we are. So autonomy mightn't be so marvelous. I mean, the patient might say, you know, I want to take this particular treatment plan because I heard from my cousin that I can still eat ice cream. And that's the sole reason for taking a particular treatment plan and undergoing an operation and everything. I can eat ice cream, or I still want to be able to play squash. Is that a good reason? But it is autonomy. Shmuley?
Well, we all have free will. If that's what the person decides, that's his problem.
That's his problem. Okay. But the question is, how did God create the world? Did he put the individual and his preferences at the center of the world? And Rambam very energetically says no. That way of looking at the world as it's me, me, me is actually wrong. So when Greeks use the word autonomy is a Greek word. Anybody know how to deconstruct it?
Auto is self.
Auto is self, and nomos is
Law.
rule or law, self-rule, okay? Did the Greeks mean that every individual should have a right to run his own life without interference by the state? Is that what the Greeks meant? Anybody
Probably
want to
not.
give an answer? What do you think?
No, no.
Absolutely not. Autonomy for them was the right of city-states, a polis, which they believed in, Athens or Sparta, to be free of imperial domination, which is why the Greeks never set up an empire in the same way that the Romans or the Persians did. Okay, of course, the line that we used to jokingly spit out about Greeks and Romans was that the Greeks fought a lot and the Romans fought a lot. But there we are. They were empire builders. The Greeks wanted to be independent, every polis, and they bickered a lot, but there was a lot of it, but not for individuals. Greek society had slaves. Greek society looked down on women. Greek society was absolutely stratified. They didn't believe in personal life. It's a modern invention. And is it good? Well, Maimonides would say, in his time, no. It focuses you too much on yourself and what happens to you in your life. And you have to look at the world through a much wider perspective. The lens has to be much broader. It's humankind and its fate, or it's the Jewish people and its fate. It's not you, Chaim Yankel, or Dvoira Mushka. Okay? So this is what he's saying in the third prong of his treatment of evil. V'chol ma she'avo me oto tov gamur. I'm on line 30. Whatever comes from him, God is absolutely good. V'sibat zeh ta'ut kula, and the reason why we all fall into the error of saying, well, God has filled the world with evil, heyot zeh hasachal v'chaverav min hehamon, is of course the stupid one and his friends from the hoi polloi, from the rest of the crowd. Rambam is never mincing in his words. Lo yivchanu hametziut rak beish mibnei adam lo zulat zeh. They only see the world from their perspective, their point of view. I am suffering. Things have been done to me which are bad. V'yidmeh kol sachal, he rubs our nose in this, and every idiot, or shall I say ignorant person, okay, imagines everything in the universe is for us. And if I'm not having a good time, well, then the universe has no reason to be. As if there's nothing. Sham is an Arabic, actually. It means it exists, not in any physical space. That the universe has no reason if I am suffering. And when fate deals him a card that he doesn't like, and his will is frustrated, then he says, the whole of the universe is bad. Think about the small role you have in the world. Then you would realize the truth. As I said, he doesn't hold back that madness that the mad people have been having madly for so long, okay? Einam omrim shehu b'chok hamalachim v'lo b'chok ha'galgalim v'kochavim. Why were they thinking about the angelic bodies? They're not angels with wings, but they are the higher spheres, the Aristotelian spheres, or they are the planetary constellations. There are species, there are minerals, and different types of creatures. They focus only on one person. Which book of the Bible springs to mind? I hear on my left, Deb, what do I hear? Job. Eov. Isn't that what happened in the book of Eov? That Eov's friends all come to him and he's suffering, and they say, there must be a reason for you to suffer. It's all to do with God being bad, okay, or you being bad and God judging you. And what happens at the end of that book, the very end? What happens? God comes along, does he answer Job and say, yes, your suffering is justified, suffering is not justified? Not for a second. What does he do? He says, Job, what do you know about the firmament, the seas, the animals, the fish, the stars, the constellations, the planets? You are just a little speck. Why do you think that everything is there for you? And if you're not having a good time, then the whole universe doesn't matter. Okay? So this is what he says. We'll finish off by reading from line 38. The true way of looking at this. All people, and definitely all creatures, is only a small fraction of all existence. You may remember that line. The Yekkers used to sing it on Motzei Shabbat before Mariv LeDavid Baruch Hashem Suri Adam LaHevel Dama Yamav Kitzei Lover. Marcel, you're familiar with that. I can see you bobbing away. Okay? But if you think about the words, Adam LaHevel Dama, man is a vanity, a tiny speck when it comes to the universe, certainly in time. Afki enosh rimau ben adam tolea, and Job makes it even worse, okay, because man is a worm, and a human being is merely a creepy crawly, I guess, okay, whatever. All right, so I was with the creepy crawlies, okay, and af shochnei batei chemar hen goyim kamar midli. That's a famous pasuk in Yeshayahu because it's in Nachamu Ami. What does it mean when you say hen goyim kamar midli? What's mar midli?
Une goutte d'eau, comment on dit une goutte, a drop of water.
A drop of water in a bucket. It's a drop in a bucket. That's what the nations are. Drops in buckets. The word mar apparently means a drop. Okay, actually, mar is a tipa. It's a drop, and it's actually a very rare form in Hebrew because mar usually means bitter. But how do you say a drop in Arabic? Merar. So you drop the mar for a drop. But this is what the prophets again and Job are telling us. We are little specks out there. We need to know our small stature, what we are. And that everything is there for us. In other words, Maimonides is asking us to change. There's a change required in human consciousness, okay? We realize our proper place, and this is what the book of Job is all about. Evil does exist, and Job was right to feel bad, and he wasn't a sinful person. But he doesn't understand the things happen, and the fact that some bad things happen to one individual does not mean that the universe and everything that God has created is bad. Again, he's not deflecting the issue of evil. He's just saying that we need to bring about a change in human consciousness. We realize our proper place in the universe and recognize the inevitability of transience. That's my phrase. Transience, passing, is inevitable. Given that we are material bodies, then we will understand that the world as we know it is indeed an embodiment of God's goodness. I mean, that's really what he's getting at here. He's not really dealing with evil, okay? Evil is real, there's no question. And it's a terrible thing when it happens to one. The question is, from a theological perspective, I think we'll stop the share. Not going to read any more tonight. From a theological perspective, put it in its proportion, okay? And if you want to have an understanding of God and not merely have some, he criticizes Al-Razi or Razes. We didn't talk about him. He was a famous Persian polymath. In particular, Razes was a doctor, very famous doctor, and he wrote some amazing stuff that was used in the Middle Ages right through. Razes, okay? I mean, he, for example, was the father of obstetrics and ophthalmology. He wrote on surgery and pediatrics, and he also distinguished between, I think it was measles and smallpox. He also described the origins of smallpox. I mean, it was an amazing contribution. He also, in his time, as Muslim theologians, doctors did, he was a theologian. He wrote on on Islamic law, as they all did. Sounding a bit like Rambam, isn't it? Law, philosophy, and medicine. They were the PEP of those days. I assume you know what PEP is. Philosophy, economics, and politics, which is what you take in Oxford as a basic degree. So we're talking about philosophy, okay, talking about medicine, and we're talking about law. And he was very influential, very enlightened, and very rational. But Maimonides says he was off the wall with his belief that evil is real. Or rather that you can attribute evil to God. Question is really the link between evil and God. And does the fact that there's evil in the world make God evil? That's the point. And we very quickly slide into that. If there's evil in the world, then God must be evil. That's not true. Think about it. Think about it. This is what God says to Job at the end of the book. There's more than you here. There's a whole world. The world works in a certain way. Things are going to happen to individuals that are not nice. But this is not the way the world is structured to we're not indestructible. Nobody is. And death will come to all of us one way or the other. Now, again, Rambam is a theologian, a medieval philosopher, discussing this, and we are much more, I think, emotional, okay? We would feel sort of a little uncomfortable, especially when we engage. Michael Rosenfeld, when we engage in bad things, when we're experiencing bad times, difficult to take distance and to say, well, it's not actually God. But let's just say these are terrible evils. and let's see if we can fix them up by making ourselves and society a better place. The blame on God is in a way a shortcut. And this is what I think Maimonides is trying to say. And I will also conclude by saying that perhaps we can learn from here in terms of the third prong, which is that we shouldn't think that we are the center of the universe. Perhaps we should think about the universe and life and nature and ecology too, that we should be more modest and humble and think about preserving the world rather than using all of it just for our own needs and our own uses. So if I was going to be a little PC here, I could make an argument, if I wanted to, for something about the preservation of nature and species by saying that human beings' fault is that they regard themselves as the center of the universe, to the exception of all other forms of life. You might find some support in Maimonides for that. So that would be, I think, my very modern gloss on what he's trying to say. So,
Aren't we Nazir Habriya?
sorry?
Aren't we Nazir Habriya? Man?
Nizir ha-Briya, Rambam doesn't use that term. And he will say again, if you, Jeff, are like Moshe Rabbeinu, then you are the Nizir ha-Briya. But Moshe Rabbeinu didn't need anything except air, water, okay, and food. And he spent his whole life extremely modestly, not mining for amber and not killing musk deer, okay? And he was only contemplating, and he was always in the presence of God. Yes, then you are Nazir Habriya. But if you're the regular fracking, okay, I said fracking, okay, human being who destroys the earth, then you're certainly not. And the evils that we cause each other, don't blame God. I think this is really what Maimonides is trying to say. He is in a way making you a little, I guess, more accepting of things that happen, not making every single setback that you have in life, even though it may be really quite terrible, into a reason for rejecting the world and life. Making the best of it, which brings us back to Viktor Frankl's logotherapy that we talked about last week. And I think that you're getting the idea. And because I think you're getting the idea of a Maimonidean ideal, which you may in fact not like at all, but again, I say you wanted to study the Guide for the Perplexed, so you have to accept whatever we are doing. I mean, we are reading what Rambam said. Next week, I want to talk about the end of the Guide for the Perplexed, where Rambam brings a lot of this stuff together and says, what should we be doing in life to achieve his idea of perfection? After that, we'll talk about reward and punishment. Perhaps we'll talk about Messiah, resurrection of the dead, and end up, as I said, this course of Shiurim ends at the end of December, in Yirtzeh Hashem, with Tamei Mitzvot, but philosophically. Okay, so that is the plan, and I'm open to questions or comments. People can say something if they want, but we can also just wish all of us a very good night and say next week for more Maimonides.
I got one question. Could you just tell us the chapter that you'll be doing next week?
Okay. The chapter I will be doing next week, I'm just going to check, because always check before you talk. Otherwise, you're likely to find yourself. I believe it's book 3, chapter 51. And in fact, I'm quite sure. I'm going to talk about actually 51 and 52. Okay?
Okay, thanks.
That's more or less at the end, because it ends at 54. All right, so that's what I'm going to talk about next week. You can read it up in English, okay, in Hebrew, and we will talk about it next week, all being well. As we say, Besurot Tovot, wherever you are in the world, may we all be privileged to have positive news, and we all hope and pray for the safe return of our soldiers, for the return of our hostages,
Hostages.
for the prosecution of a military enterprise in the best possible way,
Amen.
continued support of right-thinking people in the non-Jewish world, and for the triumph eventually of good over evil.
Amen.
On that note,
Amen.
I will say a very, very good night, and thank